All right, now to this. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard released a report she says is one of the biggest political scandals in recent history. The Trump-Russia investigation. She claims after Donald Trump won the 2016 presidential election, Obama-era officials undertook an administration-wide campaign to discredit him. The DNI director spoke on Sunday Morning Futures.
We had a sitting president of the United States and his cabinet and leadership team, quite frankly, who were not happy with the fact that President Trump had won the election. And so they decided that they would do everything possible to try to undermine his ability to do what voters tasked President Trump to do.
All right, joining us now, Fox News contributor Mark Thiessen. Good morning to you. Mark, what is new in all these documents, this blitz of documents released Friday?
Yeah, so this is really very important to get to the bottom of this, because this is one of the worst political scandals of our lifetime. We spent 2 years and tens of millions of dollars investigating what turned out to be a conspiracy theory, which is that Donald Trump colluded with Russia to steal the 2016 election. And it turned out it wasn't true. And there were a lot of Democrats were pushing this. A lot of people in the media were pushing it. But what was most insidious were the people in the intelligence community who would basically were telling the American people a pernicious lie, which is you can't see it, but we've seen secret intelligence that suggests that the president was conspiring with Russia to steal the election. And it wasn't true. Brennan was one of the worst people involved in this. He called Trump a traitor, said he had committed treason, that he was an agent of the Russian regime. And this is really bad because it calls into question the intelligence community's credibility. And so we got to get to the bottom of who did this, who is behind it, and find out why and call them out.
You know, Democrats in the intelligence community and who work on intel issues on Capitol Hill say there's nothing to see here. This is all just more on something we've already heard 100 times. Here's Jim Himes. Take a listen.
What you saw from the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was not just a lie, but a very dangerous lie, because when you start throwing around language like sedition and treason, somebody's going to get hurt.
What's your response to that, Mark?
So, I'm sorry, John Brennan accused Donald Trump of treason. Adam Schiff accused Donald Trump of treason. Eric Swalwell said he was an agent of a foreign power. So for them to say that Tulsi Gabbard is politicizing intelligence, they weaponized intelligence against the President of the United States. And look, there's two different things that are going on here. There's the question of whether Russia tried to interfere in the 2016 election, which they did.
Right.
And I would remind everyone that Donald Trump launched a cyber attack against the troll farm in St. Petersburg responsible for that election interference. So Donald Trump actually was the one taking that more seriously than the Democrats. Barack Obama didn't do that. But there's the question of whether Donald Trump conspired with Russia in that interference to help it to steal the election, which has been proven to be an absolute lie. And the Democrats pushed that lie. All Blumenthal, Warner, Schiff, Swalwell all went out and said there was evidence, secret evidence, that Donald Trump had conspired with Russia, and it wasn't true. And we need to find out what the source of those lies are. What were they seeing, if they did see anything in the intelligence community that turned out to be false, so we can restore the credibility of the intelligence community.
Well, look, some Democrats have pointed out that the origin, as you mentioned there, was really this intelligence that appeared to show at the time that the Russian president, at least, favored Donald Trump's election over that of Hillary Clinton, and that some political figures took that, perverted it, and made it a collusion.
Yeah, so CIA Director Ratcliffe actually just put out a report on this. And if you look at that report, the evidence for the interference, the idea that they were interfering in the election is clear, but whether they favored Trump, a lot of that was driven by the Steele dossier. And there was a huge fight within the intelligence community about whether to include the Steele dossier, which was paid for by the Clinton campaign, which was political opposition research that turned out to be untrue, to include that in the intelligence assessment of the intelligence agencies. And it was the FBI and Brennan who were pushing to include it, and the intelligence professionals who were saying that it shouldn't be in there. So we need to get to the bottom of that as well.
All right, you can check out those documents. They are now publicly available online, anywhere you get your news, including foxnews.com. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Mark.
So more on this. Want to bring in investigative journalist Matt Taibbi. Matt, thanks for joining our program today, and good morning to you.
Good morning.
A lot of the usual suspects, Clapper, Comey, Brennan, et cetera. But also Barack Obama is mentioned in a lot of this. And you read at Racket News that a source had told you that Obama is now, quote, center square in the Russiagate scam. Go ahead and explain that, then I've got questions for you after that.
Sure. So the last major revelation that came out was that John Brennan and James Comey were the focus of criminal investigations that have been opened by the Justice Department. But these new documents that were released by Tulsi Gabbard and the Director of National Intelligence make it clear that the investigation is now aimed at the Obama White House, and in particular at Barack Obama, because of decisions that were made in early December of 2016 to suppress the presidential daily briefing and go ahead and order a new intelligence community assessment that ultimately would have much more aggressive conclusions about Trump and Russia.
So a lot of this December of 2016 into January of 2017, I'm assuming also. You know, but Trump's people were in there for 4 years. And the current CIA director had his job for 8 months at the time. Did his people fail him? Why wasn't there more urgency on this and Trump 1.0 as there is now?
Yeah, that's a complaint I heard a lot over the weekend from people who have been following this, and even from former officials who are close to Trump. One of them said to me, a former high-ranking Trump official said there was, quote, so much corruption in the last Trump presidency that this shouldn't have been overlooked, that these documents should have come out. Absolutely. But the overall sense I get is that everyone's happy that they finally are coming out, and they're looking forward to what is likely to come out this week.
Okay, another question about Russia. Is the allegation they were trying to influence our election, or is the allegation that they actually changed votes? I think we need to be clear on that. What can we say?
So it's both. The Democrats are making a lot of hay over this apples and oranges issue, that there was never any question that they didn't actually change vote tallies, but they did influence the election. Actually, there was some question about whether they had the ability to influence the election. There were quotes earlier from that year with the FBI saying they didn't have any evidence that they had done so, and they were uncomfortable making that statement. There were also quotes saying that they lacked evidence that Russia had the ability to impact the outcome of the election. So all of this would have been passed on to somebody like Michael Flynn, because presidents-elect are entitled to receive the presidential daily briefing. That's why this is important. It's not so much what the PDB did say, it's what it didn't say. It didn't say that there was a sweeping conspiracy to help Trump. And if they had that, it would have been a very different political picture going forward.
Okay, looks like it's the DOJ's call next, and we'll see what they do. Matt, thanks for coming on. Matt Taibbi, good to be in touch with you. Thank you.
Well, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard says she has identified, quote, overwhelming evidence to show how Obama-era officials manufactured the Trump-Russia collusion hoax after he was elected in 2016. Here is DNI Gabbard on what she found.
Over 100 documents that we released on Friday really detail and provide evidence of how this treasonous conspiracy was directed by President Obama just weeks before he was due to leave office, after President Trump had already gotten elected. Creating this piece of manufactured intelligence that claims that Russia had helped Donald Trump get elected, contradicted every other assessment that had been made previously in the months leading up to the election that said exactly the opposite. So the effect of what President Obama and his senior national security team did was subvert the will of the American people, undermining our democratic republic, and enacting what would be essentially a years-long coup against President Trump, who was duly elected by the American people.
Wow, this is a lot. And the DOJ just received that referral from DNI Gabbard?
Yeah, so Tulsi Gabbard said that she was going to turn over the documents this morning. She did the official turnover, and so now it goes to the DOJ. We'll see what they find out. Let them do the investigation. Let them look into it, look at the accusations. I mean, look, this is something that happened nearly a decade ago. So certainly I think it would be maybe good for the American people to get more clarity and more information. Does it need to go beyond that? Hard to say, especially on the legal side. But the other thing I thought about with all of this is, you know, if you're the president of the United States today, you're in your second term. You won. Despite what maybe Obama or Hillary Clinton or anybody else that was associated with this hoax, whatever they were responsible for or did, you won again, term 2. And we're now at the 6-month mark for Donald Trump. And look how great the stock market is doing. The border is closed. So maybe look at that instead.
Nicole, Congressman Pat Fallon told me last hour, Republican congressman, that if there was something that was law-breaking here, that there should be accountability because this is so problematic. And he seems to think he couldn't release everything that he's already seen. Well, no one can at this point, but he said as this becomes more public, you'll see what I'm talking about.
And I agree with him 100% because, again, if you broke the law, if they actually did participate in this, I do believe in accountability. And I do believe that there should be tangible consequences for this type of behavior because what this does is it's not just the crime that was committed allegedly. It's that you destroy the trust of these intel agencies, of these law enforcement agencies, the CIA, the FBI, all of these agencies involved in that. And again, I was at the FBI in 2016, and I can tell you that this was the first time that I really felt, wow, the FBI has been politicized. And I was down in FBI Miami. Oh, yeah. It was July 5th of 2016 when Jim Comey came out and said no reasonable prosecutor will charge Hillary Clinton. I will never forget that moment. And I'm down in FBI Miami working violent crime. Literally, the next day, I was given a case of a child who had been raped by her biological father. And we're trying to work real cases in Miami. In the meantime, we're hearing about this nonsense going on in D.C., just trying to ignore it. We're like, look, that's not our problem. That's the political side of things. So again, going back to the original point, I do believe that there should be consequences because not only does it destroy the trust of the American people, it destroyed the trust of FBI agents. We're like, what is going on in my agency? This is my director. Can I trust my FBI director? And I can tell you that the FBI has never recovered since, in my opinion, because of the destructive behavior of James Comey and others that may have been involved, Brennan, Clapper, others in the intel agencies. And, you know, let's let them see what they've got. They've given the information to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Kash Patel. Let them follow the evidence. If a crime was committed, you know what they always say? No one is above the law. And you know what? You're not either. And so let's see what happens. Follow the evidence.
There you go, Griff.
Well, look, I think that to Nicole's point, accountability is the goal of this. And over the weekend, we interviewed on Fox & Friends, Tulsi Gabbard as well on Saturday, and it struck me that she's making the case that, look, this is a manipulated and politicized effort to change the narrative, to usurp Donald Trump's election, and that every American across bipartisan lines should care about accountability. And she said that ultimately that accountability goes all the way to the top, to former President Barack Obama. Now, I think to Cheryl's point, does this lead to actual charges? I don't know. I do think here's one thing that might be in the cards to come down the pike is some congressional hearings in seeing people like Comey, like Brennan, like Clapper, like Susan Rice being called before Congress, because you would think that if there are, quote, charges brought, it's because of statements they made that were inconsistent with what was actually done according to these documents.
Yeah. Can they plead the fifth, like what we've seen here recently?
We saw an awful lot of that out of the inner circle to Biden's aides.
I don't know how much more you'll get. You know, I guess my kind of top-down concern has to do with how far back this went if ex-President Obama was involved. I mean, they would have been working against Donald Trump to help Hillary win, to what else? What could have been the reason for all of that?
Because they wanted to stay in control, and Donald Trump was operating so far outside the establishment that I think to a lot of people whom many would consider the deep state, he was uncontrollable. He was such an unknown quantity that they were terrified that he would come in and upend the establishment. And, you know, it's like in many ways, he has. In many ways, he has destroyed a lot of norms that people didn't realize were detrimental to this country. And I understand why DNI Gabbard has a vested interest here, because if you remember, this is something that Hillary Clinton was pushing long after she lost the 2016 election. And she said with great certainty that Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian asset. She used the term Russian asset.
Yes, she did.
And then, you know, Tulsi Gabbard was taken aside by TSA and, you know, customs and questioned, and she was on a list and she didn't know how she got there. Well, now she's DNI, and she'll get to the bottom of some of her personal questions, but also make sure this never happens again with any president, with any administration, with any level of the intelligence agencies who were all in collusion with each other. And the Washington Post and New York Times needs to give their Pulitzers back with this sham reporting they did.
Wow. You have a last quick word.
Well, I was going to say that there's a great piece this morning in the opinion section, foxnews.com, written by our colleague, Greg Jarrett, who wrote a book about all of this. And he goes through a lot of the reasons why the legal bar might be really high. So let's see what the DOJ comes up with. But he does kind of lay out the case of where this could or could not go, depending on what the law is.
Texas Congressman Pat Fallon is on that House Oversight Committee, which is driving hard for whoever may have broken the law here to pay for it. He also sits on the Intelligence and Armed Services Committees. Great to see you today. Talk to me about just the top line in all of this. How is this different from what we knew under Trump's first term, for instance?
Well, what we found, Harris, is that the Intelligence Committee under Barack Obama was either ethically incompetent or that was a coordinated effort to manipulate intelligence for political gain. That is sure. From what I can tell you is the preponderance of the evidence certainly suggests that. It's more probable than that that happened. Now, as we investigate this further, and I personally have a lot more reading to do when I get back to Washington today, is can we get to a reasonable doubt threshold? Because what I've seen thus far is very troubling, and it truly, and I'm not being hyperbolic here, it could be Watergate-esque.
Can you share any of it? Because I know a lot of it you can't share, but people are curious to know, gosh, everybody was digging for this to in part defend what the president was calling the Russia hoax, and he was right. So why now? Like, what can you give us just a tidbit of what you think we need to know?
I think I want to also clear something up, because there's Russian attempted interference, and then there's collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, which never happened, right? I mean, since Lenin, since 2022, when their Russian Civil War was over and it became the Soviet Union, they've been trying to, in some ways, meddle in American and Western democracies. Of course, they've been trying to influence things, and I'm sure they were a party to a lot of the terrorism we saw in the 70s in Europe, et cetera, et al. But to say, in which a lot of the intelligence community said, that President Trump and his campaign were colluding with Russia is a completely different topic, which there is zero evidence that ever happened. There's also zero hard evidence that Russia effectively altered the outcome of the 2016 election.
Yeah, that's important to know, because you heard Democrats saying that at every turn. All right, I want to get to this. It's from investigative journalist Matt Taibbi. Let's watch.
The investigation is now aimed at the Obama White House, and in particular at Barack Obama, because of decisions that were made to suppress the presidential daily briefing and go ahead and order a new intelligence community assessment that ultimately would have much more aggressive conclusions about Trump and Russia.
Wow, this is really problematic because this maybe looks like it was going on far before Trump ever was in his first term as president. I mean, what would the goal have been by Obama if that's true?
Obviously, before the November election, it was to, make sure that Hillary won. And then afterward, it was to discredit and start that really a tar and feathering campaign that we saw that never ended. I mean, other networks that didn't value the truth at all, but valued spin over the truth, wouldn't stop with it. And, and that's what's troubling. And this is an egregious and criminal violations of the Hatch Act as well, if what we are finding can hold up.
Well, it's great to have you today. The story is breaking wide open. Please come back as we learn more. I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Harris. God bless. Take care.
You too.
Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard accusing the Obama administration of creating, quote, manufactured intelligence, claiming that Russia helped President Trump get elected in 2016. She has 100 pages of documents. She's sent them to the Justice Department, and she is calling for accountability. Justice correspondent David Spunt reporting live on this story for us from Washington. Hi, David.
Hi, Martha. And the Justice Department confirmed to Fox News they have those documents. No other comment from them. But Tulsi Gabbard's team says that Obama's team changed their story. And while they previously found no Russian interference in the 2016 election, then they say the Russia collusion narrative took off just before Donald Trump took office in 2017. Watch.
This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is an issue that is so serious it should concern every single American because it has to do with the integrity of our democratic republic.
Critics say that Gabbard is conflating multiple issues.
Now, what Tulsi is doing, it's a little sleight of hand, but it's worth focusing on.
Now, critics insist that President Obama's team was concerned for months leading up to the 2020 election about Russia sowing discord online via Facebook and other social media channels. You're seeing Marco Rubio there. He was a senator at the time from Florida, the chairman of the Intel Committee, the acting chairman. In 2020, he put out a statement after an exhaustive review of 2016 Russian interference. He wrote, quote, "The committee found absolutely no evidence that then candidate Donald Trump or his campaign colluded with the Russian government to meddle in the 2016 election. What the committee did find, however, is very troubling. We found irrefutable evidence of Russian meddling." DOJ officials confirmed receiving that referral again, but declined to comment further. Martha.
Okay, we'll see where it goes, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's easy to forget how outrageous all of this is, so we thought we'd highlight the biggest revelations, starting with what the Director of National Intelligence was saying back then. Right after the election, DNI James Clapper wrote the following on December 7th of 2016. Quote, "We assess that foreign adversaries did not use cyber attacks on election infrastructure to alter the U.S. presidential outcome this year. We have no evidence of cyber manipulation of election infrastructure intended to alter results." Fast forward to 2019, and Clapper was singing a different tune after then Attorney General Bill Barr said the Trump campaign was spied upon.
I thought it was both stunning and scary. I was amazed at that and rather disappointed that the Attorney General would say such a thing. He just has a feeling that there was spying against the campaign. We're losing sight here of what started all this, and that was the Russian meddling, the Russian interference in our election process. And the Russians pose a profound threat to this country.
So that's from no evidence to profound threat. That's quite a leap. And what about President Obama? A declassified document dated December 9th, 2016, reveals the intel community was working to produce a new assessment per Obama's request and seeking participation from the CIA, FBI, NSA, and DHS. Around that same time, here's what President Obama was saying publicly.
When I look back in terms of how we handled it, I think we handled it the way it should have been handled. Unless the American people genuinely think that the professionals in the CIA, the FBI, our entire intelligence infrastructure are less trustworthy than the Russians, then people should pay attention to what our intelligence agencies say.
As for anyone questioning why a new assessment was ordered, they were quickly silenced. This from a late December 2016. Quote, "Due to the ODNI whistleblowers questioning his leadership about why an IC assessment was being created that contradicted multiple IC assessments, the whistleblower is immediately removed from emails regarding the drafting of Obama-ordered IC assessment." Former FBI Director James Comey had no problem sticking by the intelligence community.
There should be no fuzz on this whatsoever. The Russians interfered in our election during the 2016 cycle. They did it with purpose. They did it with sophistication. They did it with overwhelming technical efforts. and it was an active measures campaign driven from the top of that government. There is no fuzz on that. It is a high confidence judgment of the entire intelligence community, and the members of this committee have seen the intelligence. It's not a close call. That happened.
Joining me now to dig further into this is CEO of the Federalist, Sean Davis. Great to see you, Sean. So no fuzz about it.
Yeah, it turns out there was a lot of fuzz about it. And it's fascinating what we're learning, 8 years later. That by itself is a scandal, that it took 8 years for us to learn this information, that there was actually a great deal of debate within the so-called intel community about the nature of the Russian threat. We now know that there was a lot of doubt about this idea that Russia was desperately trying to help Trump to win, that it was this some sort of profound technological effort. Based on what we know, based on the intel community's own words, there were no real cyber attacks to change votes or go after infrastructure. And we also know that the extent of their technological chicanery and shenanigans came down to some Facebook ads and some Twitter memes.
Right.
And so it's just fascinating looking back in hindsight and seeing the efforts that these people, Comey and Brennan and Clapper, these corrupt people, the efforts they went to delegitimize Trump's victory, number one, that was the first goal. And then the second goal is to cripple his administration and cripple his presidency. That's the scandal here.
And I feel like that effort is still ongoing. And I want to show a couple of a clip real quick of the effort to smear Tulsi Gabbard. And when you look at these documents now, it makes you kind of wonder if maybe this isn't what they were afraid of when they tried to brand her a Russian asset. Watch this.
I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's the favorite of the Russians. They have a bunch of sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far.
Also a reminder that just 5 minutes ago, Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat in good standing.
Yeah, and it's fascinating when you know what Hillary did. Remember, the whole narrative was Trump was owned by the Russians wanted him to win, he was colluding with the Russians. It turns out, in fact, the only campaign that was actually working with someone who was on the payroll of Russians was Hillary Clinton. She hired Christopher Steele to go do this dossier. Her campaign paid for that. Christopher Steele, at the exact same time, was working on behalf of a sanctioned Russian oligarch. And it's fascinating. You mentioned at the beginning this Senate Intel Committee report that came out. I think it was Fox News that reported early on in 2018 that Mark Warner, who was the co-chair of that committee, was having back-channel negotiations with a lawyer for that Russian oligarch, trying to set up secret back-channel communications with Christopher Steele himself. So there's a reason Democrats are furious at people like Tulsi Gabbard coming out and actually giving us transparency, because they know when the documents come out and when the intel community is transparent, their goose is cooked.
Right. It is kind of remarkable to think of what the Kremlin must be thinking. All they had to do is buy a couple of Facebook ads, and then they sit back and they watch the entire Democrat Party do all of their propaganda for years. Sean Davis, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.